Hey residents of MeepleTown, today we are looking at Zoned Out, which is a 2 to 4 player game where you are taking on the role of a city planner. You're going to be building up your different zones, trying to form these developed zones so you can build up your city and ultimately have the most points at the end of the game. So let's get to the table and check out Zoned Out. Okay, so here we have the setup of Zoned Out, and basically what we did is we took the top 4 cards from the main draw pile, we put them out there with the parking lot ones touching, and then we put the downtown card over top of that. And then the first player took, this is a 2-player setup, first player took the took 2 cards from the deck. The second player is going to have 3 cards, and that's where the advantage starts, as having more cards as the not the first player. So the first player is going to, first off, they can turn in their cards and draw new cards. And if you do that, you're going to take one of these tokens, and these tokens will be worth negative points at the end of the game, depending on how many you've taken. If you don't do that, you're going to place a card, and you will have to place a card. And when you place a card, you're either going to be covering up 1, 2, or potentially 3 blocks as the game goes on. And after you do that, you're going to place your city planner on top of there. Now, we each also have our own set of secret objectives, as well as, and I'll throw all these up on the screen, we also have 2 public objectives that we can both see. And in this case, the public objectives are that we're going to get 1 point per heavy residential area. Those are the pink ones that have 3 buildings. So there's light and medium and heavy density of the different colors, and the different colors are pink residential. The yellow ones are the commercial, and then you have the blue that are industrial. So in this case, we get 1 point per the heavy residential cards that we get, and then whoever has the most of the medium, any of the different types of cards. So whoever has the most medium of residential and commercial and industrial all together. And then again, we each have our own private objectives. Now, in a 2-player game, you're going to have 2 public, and you're each going to have 2 private, and more players, you're not going to have that many private objectives. So, all right, so what I'm going to do is look at my cards and place one out there, trying to match up whatever is available so that I can start on a zone and start kind of building up my area. So first thing I will do is place a card here, and that's going to match up these 2 right there. It does nothing right now. All I'm going to do is put my city planner on the card that I just played. And if it's in the same zone that you've been working on, nothing happens. If you leave the zone you've been working on, then you're actually going to develop that. I'll explain that a little bit later. Then you're going to draw back up to 3 cards. Normally that's just drawing 1 card, but for the first player, they're actually going to draw 2 cards because they only started off with 2. All right, so over to the pink player, and the pink player is looking at their objectives and seeing what's available out there. So they're going to place right here. Now, what they don't want to do is cover up parks, but sometimes you're going to have to. Parks give you points once you develop the zone that you've been working on. So I'm going to place that card and start on this zone of light residential, a light residential zone there. Draw back up. Turns in this game are really fast. They do slow down a little bit when you have to score, but it's still not that big of a deal overall. All right, I'm going to continue to build on the area that I've been working on. Now, I kind of look at the setup here and I think, wow, this is bad because I've got a negative 2 point abandoned building here and a negative 1 parking lot there. So I want to cover up those as best I can. And so let's see what to do. Now, I can't really cover that up. So I will just place this here. And if you notice, this one has an eye. So that means it's an industrial building, but it is not like the others, not like the light, medium, or heavy density cards. And so this one is actually a wild. So I will place that card. I'm going to take my city planner, put them there, and then I've got 3 there for my zone that I'm working on. And I'm just going to keep trying to build that up. Now you do have these deed tokens that you can place on there as markers for those wild spots if need be. Right now I don't need to do that because I can see the zone that I'm working on. All right, so back over to the pink player. The pink player is still going to work on developing that the light residential area. Sometimes the cards just aren't exactly what you need them to be, but I'll put this one here. So this will be a wild, just like we did for the green player. And what that did, though, is it put an abandoned building. And again, I'll explain that as we move on. So pink player is done with their turn. Back over to the green player. The green player is thinking, all right, I think I'm done with this development. That's what the green player is going to say. And so what they're going to do is start moving. They're going to move and work on a different zone, one that is going to be maybe a little bit beneficial for them, for their secret objectives or the objectives that are out there. And so they look out there and they think, wow, a majority of medium density buildings is what I would like to get. And so they are going to do that. They're going to start working on a medium density building here. So I place this card right here, and I'm going to move my urban planner, my city planner, just as we had before on the card that you just played. Now what happened though is I left the zone that I had been working on. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to score that area that I've been working on. And so what I'll do is I'll take buildings, these building pieces, they'll go on there. Since these are light, I'll put 1 on there per block that I developed. And so that is 3. When I have 3 blocks that are developed in a zone, I'm going to get 6 points for those, but it's going to be 6 points minus 2. So that's 4 minus another 1 and 2. So I'm actually only going to get 2 points on this one, but not getting a whole lot of points on your developments like that is not necessarily a really bad thing, because you're also developing the map and helping with your secret objectives. But also after I do that, I'm going to start building downtown. So I mentioned that this square in the middle is the downtown area. I've developed in this quadrant of that area, of the downtown area. And so I'll place one of my buildings there, and you're going to get points for majority at the end of the game. In a 2-player game, it's 5 points for the most, 1 point for the second player if they have any pieces in that downtown quadrant. And so I scored that. You didn't see this, but I did take my points here. So I've got my 2-point tokens. I'm going to put those over here and draw back up to my card. And again, I started working on this new area of the map. Now back over to the pink player. The pink player would like to continue to develop that because they're going to lose some points here. But unfortunately, they can't do that. So they're also going to start moving into another zone and looking at the public objectives. They know they want to be able to get the medium density buildings. They're going to get a point per heavy residential area that they're developing, and they don't really have the cards that can help them with that. So I think what they're going to start working on is maybe one of their private objectives. And so let's see what we got here. I'm going to take this card right here, place it up here, and start working on this light density commercial area up here. So again, just like the green player, when I do that, I'm going to place my building tokens. Since this was a light density residential area, I'm going to place 1 on each of those, and I'm also going to place 1 in the downtown area for that quadrant that I was in. Just like the other player, if you build 3 blocks, develop 3 blocks, you're going to get 6 points minus 2. That's 4 minus 1 is 3. But then I had a +1 for a park that was right there. That is going to be 4 points that the pink player will take, and they'll take that and start working on a new area. So just to give you an idea how this plays out, I'm not going to play the entire game, but the game pretty much plays out just like that. Now, if I had developed some medium density or heavy density instead of just putting one in the block that I finished. Let's say I had, let me just take a card here, and let's say I had developed this area right here with these two. I'm actually going to take 2 of my tokens and put them here. You'll still just put one in the downtown area, but what that does is helps you keep track of which ones are the medium, light medium, or heavy density areas, and that will help with end-game scoring. But also, once all of these tokens run out, or if the cards, if you're unable to draw from the draw pile anymore, that will trigger the end of the game. Whoever triggers the end of the game, everyone else except them is going to get one more turn to wrap things up. Then you're going to score from the different objective cards. Again, the public objectives and then your private. But the difference with the private is that they are private objectives for you, but everybody in the game is going to score with those cards. And so you're at an advantage because you'll be able to see what those cards are. However, you also need to know that other people are going to score from those cards as well. And then whoever has the most points is going to be the winner. Now let's talk quickly about the art and components of this game. I really like the look of the box cover of this. I think it's kind of funky. It's busy, but I still think it's a pretty cool cover. The cards, I think, are clear in some instances and not so much in others. I think the iconography on the residential, those are the pink ones, on the pink buildings as well as the blue buildings, I think are completely clear. The yellow are to an extent. So when you have a light density, the yellow is really clear. Medium density, the commercial ones are really clear. Now when you get to the heavy density commercial buildings, they are all 3 of the colors. For some reason, no idea why that was the choice made for the heavy commercial buildings, but you have pink, yellow, and blue in all of those. But to be honest with you, pink seems to be the predominant color in those commercial buildings. And so when you're trying to explain this game, it can be a bit confusing, but also just looking at the board, it can be a bit confusing. Even if you know the game, it can be a little bit of a frustration. So something you need to know about. Now, I don't think that'll be a problem. If with color blindness, maybe some of the board will be, but as far as most people just looking at that, they think that's a pink building. You know, it's not predominantly yellow. So I think that was an issue there. The components are amazing. You look at the board and it is just a beautiful setup. Whenever, you know, the table presence, when somebody's walking by the table and seeing this game played, you see all these giant buildings built up, and I'll show some pictures of, you know, a final game on here to show you, you know, these buildings, the skyscraper buildings in downtown can get really high, and it's just a really beautiful thing to see. In a 2-player game, it's fine, but also in a 3 or 4-player game, it's even better. And so I think that's a big plus for it, is the table presence. And then the quality of the components are totally fine. These are beautiful. The cards are, you don't need to sleeve the cards. I think you just leave them the way that they are. I think if they are sleeved, that'll probably be a problem, actually. The tokens, just cardboard victory point tokens, are great. These city planners are really cool looking meeple little markers on there. So anyway, not a ton of complaints as far as the components go, but as far as the art goes, I do have some complaints with that, specifically with the heavy commercial buildings, and then some of the wild ones can be a little tricky to see too. And there's just a lot. When you look at the board, right, it's a busy board. There's a lot going on, so that can be a complaint as well. But now let's talk about the gameplay. All right, so let's talk about the gameplay. First off, I want to go ahead and say that I was playing this as a 2-player game. As you could see, John and I were playing against each other, but I will say I don't think this is a great 2-player game, so I want to go ahead and start off with that. I think that one of the strengths of this game comes in the interaction between the players and trying to gain zones before other people do and develop those, and the area majority piece that's going on in the downtown and the skyscrapers that build up downtown. There's a lot of player interaction that happens there in a 4-player game, I believe, but not as much in a 2-player game. So I'm gonna kind of rate this and talk about this from that perspective, because if this was just a 2-player game, I think it's probably not one that I would be that interested in. That being said, the things I like about the game, I like the card play. You have cards in your hand, you're playing those onto the city, and I enjoy that puzzly nature of it. Now, if you just have really bad cards, that can really stink for you, and so I'm glad that they added in that piece where you can get rid of the cards in your hand and draw up new cards, because I think that sometimes you're going to have to do that to play really well at this game. But you're going to lose some points, and you have to kind of think through that piece. And so I think that's interesting. I think it's neat the way you get different points. You can get points from as I mentioned, the area majority in the downtown area. You get points from your in-game scoring cards, the public ones and your private ones. And then you also get points as you're developing your zones throughout the game. So I think all of that's really interesting. I will say, when you have your own private objective cards and everyone scores from those, I don't think that's my favorite. I think I would have had just scored myself, like just scored those cards that I had to myself without having other people do that. But the interesting piece, and that's just a personal preference, I realize that probably a lot of other people will really like that. But personally, it's not my favorite. But the part of that is interesting, I think, is that you really have to look out for what other people are doing and think, oh wow, I don't want them to have this majority from the cards that from the scoring cards that I have, or I don't want them to get a lot of points. And so you do have to think through what everyone else has. I think that's interesting. And I'm mentioning that from a two-player perspective of having two cards, but actually normally you would just have the one private scoring card. So I think that's interesting. I think it's interesting how you have to decide when you want to move your city planner, when you want to move that to a new zone and develop the zone that you're currently in. I think that can be interesting because you want to get as many points as you can from that, but at the same time, if you're building smaller zones, then you're actually potentially getting more points from the downtown area or even from the objective card. So I think all of that is really interesting. Now, the things that I don't like as much in this game is that I already mentioned one. If it's a two-player game, I don't think the player interaction is strong enough there. In higher player counts, I do think that's a good thing, but I don't think this is a great two-player game. So that's one thing that's not my favorite about this. Another is sometimes the decisions aren't really that interesting. You look at your cards and you play the cards to benefit yourself from the scoring cards that are available, and sometimes that's pretty obvious, or sometimes it's just you can't do what you want to do. But ultimately, sometimes those decisions aren't very interesting, and that can lead to some frustrations, maybe feelings of boredom because of that. That being said, it's a very quick game, and so I don't think it's not going to be this real slog to get through or anything like that, because again, you have to pay attention to what the other players are doing. So, but ultimately, sometimes those decisions aren't. They're just not that interesting. It's a puzzly game. It is a lighter family weight game, and what it sets out to do, I think it does well. But I think I would want some more variability in there that comes from, maybe different types of buildings, maybe different things that the buildings do instead of just points. I'm not really sure what that looks like, but I think I just want a little bit more for this game. But it is a family lightweight game, and because that's what it is and that's what it sets out to be, I think it's good. It's fine for that. Just me personally, I would want a little bit more. So ultimately, I think this game is fun. It's not one I'm going to want to pull out all the time. If I'm looking at a city building game, there's other ones that I can think of that I would rather play. And this one is not as thematic as some of those other ones like a Suburbia or a Quadropolis. It doesn't feel that same kind of theme. However, this is easier to get to the table for people who are new to games or to kids. I think this would be a better alternative than those games. But for me, ultimately, this game gets a 6.5 out of 10, one that's fun. Not great. It's one that if my family wants to play, I'll definitely get this out and play it. But I'm not going to be recommending playing this one all the time. So again, 6.5 out of 10 for me. Fun, family, light game. If you want to get in touch with us at MeepleTown, you can reach out to us at Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. That's at MeepleTown Games. You can also go to our website, MeepleTownGames.com. To find more of our content from our podcast and some of our written reviews and all of our videos that are listed on there, as well as a list of all of our rankings for our games. Definitely check out the website. Also, you can reach out to us on our Board Game Geek Guild. That's guild number 3407. Thanks for coming down to MeepleTown.
Thanks for joining us, and be sure to follow us on Twitter at MeepleTown Games, and connect with us on the MeepleTown Guild, guild number 3407, at BoardGameGeek.com, and also subscribe to our podcast and YouTube channel. And until next time, thanks for coming down to MeepleTown.